Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Indy Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tallman, and today we've got something a little different for you. For the last year or so, our group has been doing quarterly webinars for all of our clients. We call them our client webinar series. And this last one was titled Preparing Your Property to Compete. We are in leasing season right now. And so my business partner, Scott Hallberg, and then a couple of our staff members, Gene Davis and Chris Herring, held a webinar several days ago for all of our clients talking about that topic of, again, how to prepare your property the right way to compete in this rental market. Because we are in a challenging rental market. It's been more challenging this year than we've seen in several years. And so we think it's really important to get real clear on what it takes to get your property to compete. I thought, and we thought as a group, it made sense to share this with everybody, even though it is a client webinar. So this is the first time I've ever done something like this, and I hope you enjoy it. So this is a webinar we did titled Preparing Your Property to Compete. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Stay Invested webinar series, a series featuring in-depth, honest discussions about real estate investing and property management. Obviously, spring has sprung and the weather is warming up, which means the rental season is also heating up. Today, we're going to review strategies on how to prepare your property for the peak season and compete for the very best new residents if you're in need. So for our panel today, we've gathered our most experienced make-ready, turnover, and rehab staff members. We have Gene Davis and Chris Herring. You guys want to say a quick hi? Gene?
Yeah, sure. Hi, thank you for having me, Scott. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Gene Davis. I am the field operations manager here at T&H Realty. I've been with T&H for, I think, the past 8.5 years now, and I've been in single family property management since about 2013.
Wow. Yeah, you've done a little bit of work there. You've been with us for quite a while and done quite a few different things with us. So you've moved up into management fairly recently and running our field ops team. So appreciate everything you're doing there. And of course, we have Chris Herring also. So,
yeah, my name is Chris Herring. I'm the director of client services here at T&H Realty, and I've been with the company. Next week we'll make it 8 years officially, I think, or give or take a few more days there. And I'm also an investor. I have a few of my own rental properties as well.
Of course, I'm Scott Hallberg, co-founder of T&H Realty. I've been in property management and owning real estate for approximately 26 years. We also have purchased, rehabbed, and flipped over 100 homes in our career. So I think our business has been very experienced in making homes ready for both resident and for sale. And of course, we do that every day with our clients and also for our brokerage group for our listings. So I thought today we would take the time and review, this pertinent issue and how to make your property compete. Do a quick review of the agenda. We're going to talk about leasing trends and market trends, what's going on right now in this world. We're going to talk about making smart turnover decisions to hopefully maximize your ROI, and then ultimately end with circling back about how to make the best first impression to really get this whole thing working as quickly and as effectively as possible. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. The market this year has been very, very interesting. We are facing obviously some economic downturn, some issues that are going on. I think that's affected people. There's a locked in place kind of mentality that we're experiencing. Overall, the national averages are showing that days on market are pretty high still and for us, we're beating that. I think the national average is around 55 days, and we're in the mid 40s right now. But it is heading downward. I mean, we're seeing that the season's picking up. The national vacancy rate is about 7.2%. For whatever reason, Indiana is a little bit higher and in the nines. So we are seeing a little bit of weakness in our market specifically. But overall, the Midwest is still pretty strong. Good news is that the rental rates are holding strong. And, I guess at the end of the day, people are still moving. We are seeing an uptick. We are signing more leases now. Our days on market are starting to come down finally from the winter months. So we're getting out of the off season and we're moving into the peak season. The renters are very savvy. They start their majority of their rental searches online. They can see dozens and dozens of properties very quickly. They also are very price aware and they know their price points. So really great first impressions, lease homes faster. And we're going to talk about a few specifics here that will hopefully increase that velocity for everyone. I mean, the main takeaway, I was talking to our leasing department today, and the main takeaway from them is that residents today really want to have clean, nice homes. Doesn't have to be the very highest spec home as far as amenities, but they just really want to have clean, functional, and inviting homes. And so cleanliness is really a key there. Of course, functionality and finish level are obviously important at some point. We always try to attract the very best tenants and residents as possible. So, homes that are nicer are going to attract a better crowd. And I think, we'll talk about a few specifics here later, but I think that in general, people just want to have clean walls, decent paint. If it has carpet, the carpet be in good shape and be clean for sure. I think the hard surfaces on flooring is definitely a little more of a trend that people appreciate and would like to see because of, allergy issues and things like that. But overall, with the market being somewhat softer than it has been in probably a decade, price is obviously very important as well. And we do a lot of work up front trying to find the right price. We run active comps for every listing, and we want to get real-time data as far as the right rate right now. And it's always good to start that kind of like sweet spot on the price. And then we do take adjustments and work downward if we have to. But at the end of the day, hitting at the right price is going to get your best strike first. Yeah, I mean, obviously, though, if properties can't be brought back to the very highest level, then it's just you're going to have to take adjustments. You're either going to have to have a lower price to lure that resident in, or you're going to have to do something slightly different as far as, trying to draw in those residents. So yeah, Chris or Gene, do you have any other thoughts on, what you've seen and expectations or heard through feedback, things like that?
Yeah, I think, you really touched on it. The finishes, amenities, the functionality of the home, that is really what we seem to see in the winter. It's really interesting. Winters when we tend to build inventory and you can watch what moves and more importantly, what doesn't move. And a lot of the conversations that I and the client relations team, our property managers, the conversations we've had about properties over the winter was pretty consistent. It was, the well repaired homes in good locations. Those ones were renting very, very quickly. Anything that was, maybe not in a great location, tougher location, or maybe something that has some wear and tear, those tended to be the ones that sat longer on the market. And I think as costs go up, rent costs go up, it's really becomes even more critical that people are paying attention to what their dollar is buying. And with the, with inflation and everything that's going on right now, I think people are very, very attentive to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Gene.
You also hit on, I think the very top thing that most prospective renters are looking at right now is cleanliness, and cleanliness is such a subjective thing. So ensuring that the properties are showing at their very best is going to help with that impression. And the best cleaner in the world can go into a house, but if the paint's faded out, you're going to get the commentary that it's dirty.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because we've all seen that feedback when someone moves in and says, "Hey, I thought the house was supposed to be clean," and we have cleaned it and we have the receipts and we have actually gone back and checked and it is clean, but it's just like a finish defect that makes it look like it's dirty, like a black mark on a wall or a black mark in a tub finish, and they think it's like somehow dirty, but it's just the condition. And sometimes that can be a little off-putting. And so reglazing tubs is important. Having that clean finish, that clean look, even though it's not brand new, always helps. So some good feedback there. But yeah, overall, just to wrap this segment up, is that, the central Indiana market is still strong. Midwest is still strong. It's just that it's just not as strong as it had been the last few years, just due to market factors. But good thing is that single family homes are still in demand. Um, there has been a lot of multifamily come online here in central Indiana. For the most part, those are new construction, a lot of amenities, that type of thing. So if people want multifamily, there's a lot of choice out there, but a single family home will beat that, for a lot of people. So the only thing that's really super struggling right now is our small multifamily buildings that don't have amenities. Some of the older construction in traditionally good areas that were easy to rent in the past, those are having a little more of a struggle right now because of the new competition with the brand new shiny multi-units. But the good news is single families are still pretty stable and probably will be going forward. So
Yeah, I don't think you look at the people who are interested in single family, two of the things they're looking for is not having anybody up against them that they don't know on a common wall, and also having green space, some kind of area to relax and enjoy, and that's just something that the multifamilies can't offer.
right, right. I mean, duplexes aren't too bad because they have a little bit of the best of both worlds. But those we see a lot of struggle and weakness in the quads and in the other smaller, less than 20 unit buildings right now because it's just hard to compete with no amenities, no weight rooms, no dog parks. It's amazing what they do in new construction now.
Yeah,
So
it's unbelievable, and I not only did do it there, they I mean, a couple of kids that are college age, the amenities the kids have in the dorms and their schools now are just, I mean, it's a higher level than what we might have experienced, 20, 30 years ago.
well, that's for sure. I mean, back in my college days, I lived in a dorm that probably was finished in the 60s and kind of stayed the same way all through the 90s when I was there. But yeah, today's youth, I guess, they're getting kind of used to newer things, and that kind of sets the tone for what they want when they want to rent a home. And that's where, like, even in Broad Ripple here, where we're located, for years, you can basically rent a home that had shag carpet, didn't have good paint. I mean, it was just almost laughable what people tolerated. But in
Yeah.
today's world, with the market, the internet, and then people's preferences changing, you have to be on top of the game all the time, basically.
Yeah, it touches on a really good point. Even, I did a tour of Green Bay, so Bears fans don't shoot me. But what they were even talking about was how they're feeling the impact of what the colleges are doing, the amenities that are being provided, that they actually had to up their game. We're talking about professional football, had to up their game on what they offer in their weight rooms and everything that they provide their players. So that shift is carrying through everywhere, is what it feels
It's
like.
kind of, yeah, it's like pervasive. It's like this has fingers everywhere. So, all right. Well, look, I think that kind of leads into our next topic is here. How do you set smart upgrades? How do you make your budget? How do you plan for your turnover that obviously has, that will draw in the right resident from a condition standpoint, but also get the property done in a fairly quick manner to minimize that vacancy? I mean, not only are you talking about like what light fixtures give you the best return on your value, but you're really talking about overall ROI, which includes having as little vacancy as possible, because that is really the silent killer in return is high vacancy in those days that you don't have a resident in there. So, Gene, I thought, your department really handles the day-to-day work in this area. I thought we would let you kind of talk about what factors do you work owners through and trying to make these decisions that we have on this slide.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when we're approaching a turnover, we're wanting to obviously increase the ROI and minimize the vacancy. We really want to focus in on the high impact improvements. So, high impact improvements that are going to make the property feel clean, modern, and well maintained is what's usually going to give us the best ROI. So, like fresh paint remains one of the highest value investments that you can put into the property at the turn. It counteracts that cleanliness, so it makes it feel clean and updated immediately as soon as they see the photos online before they even get to the home. Obviously, we want to focus in on neutral colors, durable colors. Kind of opens up the renter pool. It makes the home feel more approachable for anybody looking at it. I find that flooring upgrades matter. We want to replace worn out carpet. You guys were talking about, shag carpet and broad ripple. That's no longer acceptable to many renters. So either updated clean carpet or durable LVP in the main areas. The LVP, it tends to improve both the leasing speed and future maintenance costs. It has a longer lifespan, so it doesn't need cleaning, deep cleaning every year. It doesn't need repairs to it as often as carpet would. And then from a fixture point of view, lighting, nowadays everybody is focused on the lighting. LED lighting is a thing. The old flush mount lights don't offer as much brightness as our, social media world has led us down the path of. So we're looking at brighter lighting. Faucets, we have very heavy hard water buildup in Indiana. Faucets become a thing immediately with residents that are looking. The slightest bit of buildup makes it look old and outdated. The same can be said for cabinet hardware or door handles. I think that updating those fixtures creates more of a modern appearance at a relatively low cost. And then the other thing for, smart improvements, high impact improvements would be curb appeal. We often overlook curb appeal, landscaping, pressure washing, the exterior of the home, any kind of exterior touch-ups. A relatively inexpensive upgrade to make is refreshing the front door. Just putting a new fresh coat of paint on it makes everything look like the home is well maintained and well cared for. I find that as residents tend to make emotional decisions first, as long as it feels like it's well updated and well cared for, I think that it's going to boost the marketability and the ROI as you make your plans with the home.
Yeah, that's a lot of great advice there. I think it does kind of just come back to just basic real estate 101 stuff. I mean, you really can't, it really comes down to price, location, and quality. And you really can't change the location, obviously, of where your home is, but price versus quality is an important thing. And having that, providing the minimum that draws in the best quality resident is our base. But there's also chances that you can make improvements, small improvements to maximize your rent return, get a little bit lift in your rental rate, or maybe if that's not your strategy, just to get it rented faster. So at the end of the day, just having that really attractive product is going to make you stand out on top. And I think we'll talk about some marketing issues later in the presentation. But right now, I agree. These are the heavy hitters that we'd like to see and we try to address. I mean, unfortunately, all of this is much more expensive now than it used to be. I mean, inflation's really racked this industry as far as doing labor, cost of materials, has really ratcheted up over the last few years. But these are, somewhat required, though, each time you have a turnover to make the property attractive again. Chris, do you have any other insight or feedback?
Yeah, one of the things that really is in the forefront of my mind, I'm looking at this as a lens of not just the investors that we have on a daily basis, but also as investing in my own properties myself. I have two properties right now that were purchased after COVID. And so what does that translate to? That translates to a higher interest rate on the mortgages. And so part of my strategy, not only did we do this well repair, we were, absolutely trying to get the highest value we could on a refi to try not have any money in it, but also, maintaining our strategy of keeping the property very well repaired in right now, until we get to that point where we refi. Because I'm sitting at an interest rate, depending on which property is, somewhere between 6 and 7%. I'd love to get down to a 5 if I can get to there, and anything below that is just beautiful. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm prepared for that. And so I think also when people see that they're looking at the cost side of things, oh my gosh, we're asking you to do this and that and whatever. The other side to look at is refining part of your strategy? Because if it is, making those repairs now, doing those updates, those upgrades now is going to be cheaper than 3 years from now, if that's how long it takes rates to go up. So I think it's something to really pay attention to. The other thing that I'm an absolute advocate of is, there are two things that Gene touched on specifically. Flooring. Flooring is one of the few items out there in a home that receives daily wear, and carpet just doesn't cut it. I wouldn't. The only time I put carpet in a home or ever put carpet in a home was if it was a second-story home, two-story situation where the neighbor hears the people upstairs, downstairs, then I was considering flooring, or maybe in a bedroom, something like that. And the other thing is the lighting. Lighting fixtures are very cheap, relatively speaking, to do. They make an amazing impact. that resident, when they walk in and view that property, they're looking at it for a couple minutes. And brightly lit translates to clean and fresh and new. Did that with with both of my properties that we spoke about. We put can lighting in, and it's amazing how it took a mid-century ranch and made it feel much more modern just because we had this bright modern lighting.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, back in the day, the brass lights are just sort of, although I guess they're kind of coming back in a way, as long as they're nice and modern. But that was in our rehab days when we would flip properties, that was always a must. We always had to update fixtures, lighting, countertops, things like that. Really, eye level things that people see when they walk in and make those first impressions. So, really like circling back to what Gene said, even like the very front door, that should be the most attractive thing on the outside of the house. Just so when they walk up and they're trying to do the lockbox, they're not put off by scratches, dents, or anything like that. So that really makes a big impact as well. So
they make their decisions within the first 3 to 5 minutes, and if they walk in there, it used to be, we don't do those self-show escorted showings anymore, but I can remember going through those escorted showings, and you knew you had somebody when they mentally started living in the home. We could put the
Mhm.
couch here, this would go there. Those are the types of things. And that's why those first impressions, the first room you walk into, the front door, things like that are so important.
Yeah, we can't bake cookies and put that fresh, yummy smell in there. But yeah, we definitely want the places to smell fresh and clean and not have any off-putting odors, that type of thing. So again, circling back, cleanliness is important. And just having it appear fresh. It doesn't have to have the most high-end or luxury or designer, fixtures, but just stuff that's fresh and clean and modern. So. Okay. Any other big or issues on this topic that we should review before moving on, or?
One more thing I want to add to that, though, is as we're going through this, I think it's important for investors to realize that every market is different. I know we have a lot of investors that have properties in many different markets, and what may work in another state may not work here in Indiana. So not living in the home, but really approaching it as this is the investment and really understanding what this market is like and what sells here versus what may work in a different market. I think those are important things to keep in mind as we're going through any kind of upgrade or improvement to a property in the area.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've had clients from other areas that don't understand necessarily what our climate really does, and how it impacts. We have a lot more rain. So if you're in a drier environment, you're not used to mowing every week like we have to here. Sometimes, I was looking at my lawn today. I'm like, man, when did it get mowed last? It was mowed earlier this week, and it's already due. The good news is I've got a son who gets to do that, not me. Uh, but it's those different situations in the environment on the exterior, especially the landscaping, things like that. Those do have an impact, and I've lived here all my life. Gene, you've lived here quite a bit of your life, and I think Scott, you're another native Hoosier as well, aren't you?
Yeah. I've been here my whole life. Yeah.
Yeah, and we you live it every day, you get to the point you really understand what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, the good thing is that we are local area experts in this area, and we have a lot of great staff members like yourselves and other people in our team that can help guide through these issues, kind of help explain these issues. And we're here to try to recommend the best course. I mean, we do allow and we will work with our clients to customize a response to meet their budget or try to meet their budget at least and have that right balance. But we understand not every client can do everything that's recommended, and we're okay with that to a certain extent. We know that not all our properties are going to be perfect, but we know that the better they are, the better they lease, the better quality residents are in there ultimately, and the higher rent rate you'll get, which has a long-term impact of keeping the properties maintained, not only from the appraisal standpoint, like you mentioned, but just keeping up with that deferred maintenance, keeping up with the upkeep, and that keeps the value, and your equity will grow, hopefully better over time if the property is maintained and kept at least in bar with the rest of the environment here, the rest of the marketplace. So, okay, well, hopefully we had some good input there and some good ideas to make, people's decisions of where the money should be spent to try to attract that best resident. The next topic here is we do have a certain bright line or a line that we can't cross. And we don't ever want to cut corners on health and safety compliance. I know it's not a fun topic here, but we do have minimums and we have property standards for a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is because we don't want anyone to get hurt. We don't want that liability risk for ourselves or our owners. I thought we could spend a few minutes here, Chris, kind of going over some of the requirements that are out there and talk about why we do this.
Yeah, there are a few reasons why we do this. Let's start with that. Liability, negligence, they're big words. They're scary words. They usually involve lawyers. And that is something that obviously we want to avoid, not just for the clients, but for also ourselves as well, because we do have a shared responsibility with our clients in making sure these homes are cared for and in proper condition. There are, layers of things that we have to pay attention to. There are, and it is not the same as an occupied home, a homeowner situation. There are things that we have to do above and beyond that. And those requirements come from a variety of agencies. It can be HUD, it can be so federal agencies have their say, state has their say, local government has their say. So we have the Health and Hospital Department, which is people would typically call the health department here in Marion County. They have their own requirements, and even we've found that within Indianapolis itself, there are certain areas we have what's called Unigov that they have some older rules on the book back when there were towns or townships that had their own rules. So Beech Grove, which is part of Indianapolis within Marion County, actually has its different standards for smoke detectors. And so we have to be aware of all of these things. And then we have our own standards that we put in here as well to kind of, long story short, it's based on the lessons we've learned, and those lessons learned sometimes are through blood, sweat, and tears. So yeah, we have certain things that we will not yield on because either legally we can't, or we just know from a liability and negligence standpoint, this is the best approach because we realize that when liability or negligence raises its ugly head, it costs money because attorneys are involved. Safety items, very simple, the ones that make sense. Smoke detectors are required all throughout the state of Indiana. SEO detectors are required in some situations. Handrails are required, and that can vary from municipality from one city or town to the next. Indianapolis says, hey, you have to have a handrail anytime there are 4 steps. Muncie, anytime there are 2 steps. So we have to be cognizant of those and make sure those are set up as well. Of course, have electrical and plumbing codes, but there are also situations where, if you buy a home, you will find there might be a electrical panel or a type of wiring that insurance doesn't like or is actually can cause real risk, and Jean will be able to touch on what happens when you take the cheap route for electrical. She was she was a resident of another, it's not a property we managed, but she unfortunately had a fire that she can talk about here in a moment. And we also are doing property documentation and inspections. You'll notice when we do our move in and move out evaluations, you will find at some point in those evaluations, we talk about the smoke detectors and we take video of us actually testing those. That again is a lesson learned in blood, thankfully not by us, but by another management company who did not do proper documentation, and it ended up resulting in $1 million claim that they lost. And then of course, handling deferred maintenance proactively. The cheapest time to repair something is early, before it starts affecting other parts of the home. A simple roof leak, a gutter overflowing, things like that. You fix it now before it gets inside the envelope of the home. If you don't, and it does get inside the envelope of the home, now we're not just fixing a gutter or a roof. We're also fixing drywall. We might be fixing flooring. We might be doing mold remediation. As painful as those things sound like, it's like, can we put this off? Can we wait for this? My advice is always the same. If it involves water or it involves electricity, fix it now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you mentioned a couple of things. I mean, you're right. We're not just trying to be difficult with clients. We've have our rules and our processes for very valid reasons. We've learned the hard way in some cases. We also have studied very diligently on trying to understand the rules of the game so we don't violate these issues. Knock on wood, we've had a very good track record of no injuries. For the most part, there's a few minor things here and there, but it really comes down to the injuries we do have really come down to handrails. And over the years, we've gotten a lot stricter and really studied, handrail requirements very specifically because it just takes one person to slip and one person to sprain their ankle or break their ankle or whatever. And it's an ugly situation that gets drawn out. And yeah, the only people that ultimately win are the lawyers. And we don't like that to happen
Yeah.
or want that to happen.
Yeah.
Another thing that, I think you hit on is insurance requirements. We had a fire in the building, and it wasn't due to any type of mechanical issue. It was negligence. Resident smoking on a deck caught our building on fire. And that whole process started a whole chain of events, including us being dropped by our carrier, our insurance carrier. So we had to go through a whole new insurance process to get a new carrier. And yeah, that insurance game has really changed. I mean, there's a lot stricter and different rules. They're basically seriously investigating roof quality. They're looking at handrails too, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. They all have these requirements on my own personal rental properties, which sometimes are actually tougher than the state and local ordinances. But so you have to take those into consideration too. There could be extra requirements, and you don't want to go uninsured. So we had no choice but to, you know, put a few new roofs on and to address these issues as needed so we can get our properties insured. And that's, they were using the AI technology, they're using satellite photos, they're checking these things out. And they're also doing drive-bys and they're doing their due diligence because insurance losses across the nation are just super high right now. Insurance companies are becoming tougher and tougher. So.
Yeah, in regards to that, we are seeing it to the point where insurance companies are refusing coverage if there's a branch overhanging the property. So not even touching the roof line, but visible from all their different views. If there are leaves over the roof, they're turning down coverage. They're very strict right now. I want to touch back on a couple of things that Chris said. The smoke detectors, absolutely. As you mentioned, a lot of these standards came from different facets, so different origins, whether it's state, local, federal. And one of the things that we focus on is sometimes the habitability requirements are different for an owner occupant than they are for a rental. And so in a rental property, we have to comply with what the rental regulations say. And it can come down to smoke detector placement. I had a situation recently with somebody that had a new build, relatively newer property, just built, passed all the inspections, but the smoke detector didn't meet the rental requirement. So, when we're asking people to move these things or install an additional one, it's not because we're being difficult. It's because we need to comply with what that condition standard is and what the government and everybody else is telling us we need to for safety. And then you were talking about the fire and the electrical. I am the biggest proponent of safe electrical. You'll hear that from us a lot. I did live in a property that we had a fire on Christmas Day that started from a faulty breaker. We had old baseboard heaters that were never terminated. And the theory was, let's just turn the breaker off. Somebody came in, a vendor came in, turned a breaker on, nobody noticed. And then one night the fire started inside the wall. So not a fun thing to go through as an occupant, not a fun thing to go through as an owner, as an investor. It's a very stressful situation for all parties involved, and everything we can do to prevent it up front is really what we're guiding along the way.
Yeah, our processes involve, thorough evaluations, but we're not home inspectors, so we can't see in things like that. But we do our best to try to notice things. And then obviously when we see something that doesn't look right, we have to get it evaluated further by a qualified technician. And then that therefore handle it after that if it is confirmed to be an issue. But yeah, I think we have good processes in general that are very thorough. And sometimes that puts people off. I think they'll get a dozen-page or even longer report, and they'll see this tons and tons of documentation of issues. And we're here to help navigate through that. Sometimes it's just informational, sometimes it's suggested, sometimes it may be required. And that's where we're here, and our property managers, and in conjunction with our project managers and our management team, can help navigate those for our clients and make the best decisions to stay within budget and have that right balance of making the properties attractive, but also not crossing that line of having any defects that would be a safety or a risk issue. I think it'd be a good point to talk about while we have a few minutes here is talk about handling deferred maintenance. I know we touched on it briefly, but I know, Chris, you've mentioned before, it's like when your furnace goes down in the middle of winter, you're under the gun to get it replaced. Because in Indiana, we have to require heat at all times, or we're required to provide heat at all times in properties. And if your furnace goes down in a crisis in the middle of winter, you don't have the luxury of getting 5 bids, getting something on sale. No one is offering that for the most part. I think there is a process and a recommendation that we review mechanicals, look at age of appliances, things like that during these vacancy periods to make sure we're not, and to try to hedge off any crises later, is do these selective upgrades while you have the time, do a furnace replacement in the summer to try to get something on sale, et cetera, et cetera. Chris, do you want to go a little more over that?
Yeah, absolutely. I had my own experience where last fall, actually, I guess it was last summer, air conditioner went out in my house, called the technician in, they made the first repair. 2 weeks later, the same situation failed again, and it is hot. And I looked at my wife at one point. I said, "Hey, do you want to roll the dice on this? Do you want to, just kind of open windows and get through the summer, or do you want to just go ahead and buy this thing?" Because the machine was 25 years old at that point. And so I called in a friend of mine who runs an HVAC company, and he's like, "Yeah, look, here's the situation." He's like, everybody right now has HVAC problems. HVAC problems for the HVAC industry. They're here in the Indianapolis market. They are busy 6 months out of the year. There are 3 months in the summer, 3 months in the winter where they are their busiest. And if your system goes out during those times, you are competing with what's available in the local market, both in labor on who can get there that time, and also the equipment. They're all buying from, the same set of supply houses. And so when systems start to fail because of extreme heat, extreme cold, everybody's buying those systems, and you may just be a little late to the game, so to speak. And what's left is left, and that's what you have to purchase. My advice is, if you're getting to that point where your HVAC system is about 17 years of age, and especially if you start to see repair needs on it, it's control boards, main blower motors, the purge motors, things like that. That's the time to really seriously think about it. And if you're looking for the opportunity to get the best price is going to be in the fall or the spring, probably is when you're going to see that. And it's going to be the situation where you want to do it according to your timeline and not the machine's timeline. And the other thing to really note here, one of the departments that I, manage is our maintenance department. And they have this habit, the clients say, "Hey, I want us to get 3 estimates." I understand that. What they don't realize is the number of estimates that we get for HVAC systems on a weekly or monthly basis. We are at any given moment always getting some kind of estimates, probably. And so we really do have our finger on the pulse of what of our vendors, who's offering the best deal. And when we bring it to you, there are two things that are making our decision as to what we bring to you. First is price, and the second is availability. If we're in a really cold weather or hot weather environment, the vendor that may have the cheapest machine normally may not be available to install it, or they may be out of supplies. They may not be able to get the thing in the time that we need to set it up. And simply put, one of the requirements is that when these systems go out in these weather moments, we do have to get them repaired or replaced in a timely manner. And we can't wait 2 weeks to get 3 estimates when the resident is dealing with cold or heat.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that, requirement. There's certain things we consider emergency, and it's really based on what the health department will say. You have to provide water, you have to provide heat at all times, and failure to do so can have a 24-hour order. I mean, we don't want to push things to that point and have the extra compliance, the extra headache of having government agencies involved, and we want to handle things before that happens. And so we try to handle it, as quickly as possible. Look, if something was in like an odd, like special order piece of equipment, and there was going to be an extended period to get that in from somewhere else that's not locally available, I mean, there are ways to deal with that effectively with the resident. There could be temporary housing subsidy, or there could be some kind of rebate in the paid rent, so they're not double paying at least. So there's things we can work around, but for the most part, we try to handle things in a normal way that provides the best resident satisfaction, because ultimately they are all our customers. I mean, they're living in a home, they want it to work, and they don't want to pay rent no matter what it is for anything that doesn't work. And so we have to make sure at all times that that's happening. So any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing that touches on what you just stated is there's a large industry software provider who deals with maintenance, work orders. They have a really good understanding of that. They also have a good understanding of renewal rates. And what they found is major incidents like an HVAC system going out, things that aren't repaired in a timely manner, can reduce the chance of getting a renewal. So your resident to renew by 70%. And that is the cheapest turnover is no turnover. And keeping a resident in place is always the better opportunity as long as they're maintaining the property good condition.
Yeah, I mean that's very interesting. I mean, touching on renewal rates. I mean, our renewal rates are a record high. We put a lot of effort into renewing residents and trying to minimize these turnovers in the first place. And the good news is that's working because we have, knock on wood, far fewer move outs in today's environment than like this time last year and et cetera. So we do have success there. We know that residents, and it's been reported for years that one of the biggest dissatisfactions of resident experience is maintenance. You basically have one chance, you have one event that could happen. And if you don't handle it in a proper way, that's going to set the tone for either them being fed up and being done and moving on to another home or successfully keeping them. And so if we can do that and handle an adverse event in a good way, that builds trust, that builds reputation, that builds longevity in the residents' experience, and they stay longer. And no one likes to go through an emergency without a required service like an AC or a furnace or even a refrigerator or especially electricity, water, things like that are needed for minimum life. So okay, well, that's a lot of good stuff. I think again, the next section we're going to go over is really going to be talking about how to combine everything into really the biggest strategy here is let's try to get the first best impression and really wrap all this up into getting the properties done quickly and making that first impression. So I think we've talked about this before in some other webinars is like leasing strategies. And these are just kind of basic 101 things that we do. And something that we've done and evolved over the years is that we've really upped our game on photography. And we do offer, the nice thing is that our staff generally does a pretty good job. I mean, we have good technologies. iPhones today take really strong pictures. I mean, our current iPhones are as good as professional cameras just a few years ago. But there's no doubt that a professionally trained photographer will do a better job. And we do have that. We've done a bulk deal where we can provide that service for our clients. And the nice thing about that, there's a durability with those pictures. It isn't just every time you have a vacancy, you have to do new pictures. They do have a shelf life of at least, probably 2 or 3 turns, depending on the level of upgrade you do each time. Once the property starts changing in appearance, you have to change the pictures. But if you can keep everything the same for a while, those pictures have a durable lifetime, and we will reuse them for multiple listings. Obviously, pricing strategy and aligning it with the condition of the property. You're not going to get top dollar for properties that aren't in top condition. People are just too smart in today's environment, today's marketplace. They do the research. They know what prices are. They're seeing dozens of homes online. And so you have to be savvy there. We have a good team that will do that, help you through that process. Having the property showable. I know there's always been a pressure, hey, let's get it on the market. But if you're not ready and the property has issues still, even though we may explain pardon our dust, we're trying to finish through a few things. Rushing that process can really set a bad tone and actually cause further delay in getting the property reoccupied. Once you have some days on market, if the first week is really off-putting and all the residents see it in a bad shape or unclean or even not complete, you're going to waste that time. And then later, when it is ready, people will see it as a stale listing. So the whole idea is that we want to hit the market when it's ready, it's clean, it's in the best shape possible. We do a lot of things with virtual staging now, so that provides a lot of free service that we do to provide that. I guess that people can see what it would look like if they were living there. Like Chris said, a lot of people like to visualize them living there, and I think this virtual staging really helps. And we do that fairly quickly. And then obviously, we do monitor feedback regularly, and we will have to address if there's any issues that come up. And not only from something that maybe wasn't addressed from the original turnover, But just as the property is shown, it's going to start having foot traffic. There could be things that happen with, leaves and dirt and debris, footprints, things like that. And we always want to make sure that the properties are maintained and in good marketing condition throughout the whole process. I think we talked about other services like lawn mowing and things that have to happen just to make the property attractive. Of course, in the wintertime, you have snow removals and things like that as well. But of course, Gene, your team really drives this because you're out in the field, they're out looking at these properties, they're responding to our feedback responses, and they're handling these things, recommending things to our clients through our property managers. What other things do you see that really keep that marketing and that first impression up?
I think that cleanliness is going to come first. That's our number one feedback I think that we receive is it could be the slightest thing. I don't know what drives people, but somehow an empty bathroom in a vacant house is tempting. Bathrooms and toilets usually are top on our feedback list as well. They need some attention, I guess, to get it back to where it goes. And the next thing I think goes to the odor. I think that's the next feedback if we receive it. So those are the top things that we're getting from people. And those can happen fast. Something could have happened in the neighborhood and now it's wafting into the house. It may not have been that way when it was put on the market 10 days ago. So just keeping an eye on it and making sure that it stays in that condition that we set it out for. It may be on the market for a couple weeks, but it's still somebody's first impression. So we want to keep that impact value as if it was day one.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, we do regular checks. We have a progressive marketing program. So it isn't just we put on the market and just kind of wait. We do reviews weekly. We do, at certain timelines, we'll have suggestions for price reductions if it starts dragging out a little bit. And then we also help share that pain. We try to, offer concessions. We work through a reduced fee structure. We want to help clients do that. I mean, our number one goal in our leasing department is to get the properties rented as quickly as possible. They're all motivated to do that. We have a great team that's dedicated to that sole task. And it does work hand in hand with our field team to work together as an ultimate team to make sure everything is handled properly. But ultimately, we have a lot of people in our company that are dedicated to this. It is one of the most painful things that people have to go through is waiting to get a new tenant in there. So, Chris, do you have any thoughts or insight?
Yeah, it was interesting. She mentioned odor and things like that. It's a dynamic thing. It's not always the same. When we walk into a property within 24 hours, 48 hours of a resident moving out, the home's going to smell and feel like one thing. Go through the process, get it cleaned. Even the weather has an impact on how a home will smell, not just by the temperature and the humidity, which can cause off-gassing, things like that, but also how often the furnace or the air conditioner cycles during the time that the home is vacant. And if we have that perfect weather window where that system isn't coming on naturally or normally to pull humidity out or or to just clean the air, you can get some odors that come over time. And what we found is, we solicit feedback. We ask anybody who's prospectively looked at our properties to give us feedback. And I think there's a lot of times that we get some feedback that is well-intentioned but poorly described. And so they'll just say, hey, no, it could be a little cleaner. They found a little dust somewhere at the joint of a counter and a backsplash or something like that. But they just say the home is dirty. And then, that sends off a chain of responses to figure out what they mean by dirty. And cleanliness is subjective, but as Gene has mentioned, we use professional cleaners to clean all of our properties. Those properties are in great condition, and then once people start showing it, it will change, especially in wetter months. Right now, we've just gone through a lot of rain, so mud is a thing, and somebody may track in mud, or even just with the humidity going up, it's been really humid this week as well. We're going to start to notice some things that are off-gassing that may not off-gassed in a drier environment.
Yeah, there's always no doubt that we had a ton of rain last night and I opened my door and it's just like this musty smell that kind of hits you. But yeah, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there's no serious issue. And we do try to be proactive with that. We have, a vacancy inspection rate that we want to do. But it starts before that. We have the completion, verifications. We have the final make ready check. We have several different visits to the property during this process to make sure that everything is complete in the right condition as promised. and accordingly planned. At the end of the day, we understand that sometimes not everything can be done, and we do try to document that. So when there's marketing questions, we don't have to keep on asking, hey, is the carpet going to be replaced? If unfortunately the carpet couldn't be replaced, but it is clean, we have those instructions, and we try to work through applicants the best we can. But yeah, our whole goal, the very large part of our company is really set up to try to get these properties not only in the right condition, get on the market as quickly as possible, then once it's on the market, try to handle and get someone confirmed and get a lease signed. So just to quickly review, we do suggest and we offer professional photography. That can be a great distinguishing factor. We try to get the marketing data and the descriptions filled out really well. Pricing strategy, we will recommend our current market rates to you as the owner and try to get that aligned and set for the most optimal strike point and try to get things within 30 days or less. And then obviously as things transpire, if there's a need to make adjustments, we'll be reviewing that on a weekly, bi-weekly basis or it's a weekly basis, and we have certain milestones that bi-monthly and monthly that we'll make certain adjustments over time to progressively try to make the property more appealing and respond accordingly. It's funny, as we kind of touched on earlier, we've been doing this for over 25 years, and a lot of things have changed over the years. I mean, I remember days where you basically put a for rent sign out the yard and the phone started ringing because people just wanted to live in a certain area of town and they were desperate for housing no matter what it is. Unfortunately, the market is a little different now, and you've seen different demand with the current market situation with economics and political issues. But at the end of the day, people are still leasing every day, and we are seeing signs in the market that it is getting, the seasonal effect is taking effect. We are seeing more transactions. Things are moving quicker. Our inventory is actually very low on our available listings right now. But we have some homes we're working through trying to get on the market. So we're trying to get that ready for the peak season and try to get those additional homes on the market, because every time we list a home, it actually draws in more and more interest for all our listings. And we want to try to do that as quickly as possible.
Gene, one of the things that we've talked about is how do we understand what is the market doing in a larger scale, at the larger scale from a finishes standpoint. And one of the things we tend to do is we look at these, we talk about these new construction, the multifamilies that are being built and whatnot, and looking at the finishes. What are you seeing in finishes right now? I know you talked a little bit about flooring. Are you seeing more stone tops, countertops? What are you seeing right now?
I think it's important to really pay attention to where the property is located first. Know your neighborhood, know your surroundings. Let's not overdo the house because you're not going to get a return on it. Outside of that, yes, we're seeing more quartz countertops, more hard surfaces. I think that in any rental environment, the harder you can make the property, the less repairs you'll have to make down the road. So having that mindset going into it I think is important as well.
Yeah, I agree. We recommend flooring that has a heavier wear surface or thicker wear surface on it. Gotten a master class. One of our friends he sells flooring, and got to talk to him and learn a master class about the construction of flooring. I didn't know that I cared that much about it until I started talking to him. And even started telling me the substrates, the difference between, using the substrates that are with underneath that finish and that wear layer are generally two types of construction. They're either made out of wood or they're actually made out of what he referred to as stone. And he finally, one day, to help me understand it, he showed me the difference on the impact strikes on a wood core versus this stone core that's underneath these things. And it's like, yeah, suddenly it all made sense. I understood why that 20-year-old Pergo floor that I have in my house today has all these chips and dings and stuff in it versus the newer flooring that we've been putting into houses that isn't quite iron, but it seems to wear pretty solidly, and that's a great investment. I saw it in my home appraisals by putting those new floors in, those nice floors in, the impact on my appraisal showed. So I think it was a net positive from what we saw.
Okay. No, I agree with the flooring is that, for many years now, we've been trying to pull carpet out when possible and put harder surfaces in. And carpet was kind of the go-to for a long time, but it seemed to be like a revolving door cost that you get a couple of years, I know it's supposed to Generally, we say carpet can last up to 7 years, but that's pushing it in a rental situation where you have a lot of traffic, a little heavier wear than like a homeowner would wear. So we've definitely tried to go to hardwood or laminates when possible, and that's really made a difference. I think in some ways people do appreciate that. It looks longer, it looks nicer, and lasts longer without that repetitive cost. So
Yeah, I spent 2, 3 years, out of high school into the college years as a carpet cleaner. That was that's how I made my money. And I've got a little bit of carpet left in this house, but it's not by choice.
yeah,
My
I think
master bedroom may still have it, but everywhere else will be, and maybe the stairs, but everywhere else is
yeah,
hard flooring. Even my
that's
office I'm in right now.
that's
Yeah.
probably one of those professions that you don't want to know, like what you see come out of carpets.
Oh my gosh, the carpet is such an incredible source of odors and everything else. There's pull carpet back and look at the underside of it, look at the pad, and you just realize just how much it retains. Even doesn't matter how often you clean it, something's always there.
It's
Something's
only
always
good
always
for a short period when it's brand
yeah.
new, or maybe the first month, and then that's
Right.
really about it. So
Feels good until about the third cleaning, and after that, you're just
yeah.
killing. I've got allergies on like none other, so keeping that dust out of the carpet and stuff is just a constant battle.
Well, Gene, any final thoughts before we wrap up today? Or
My only other thing I want to add is when people are approaching this kind of a turnover or renovation, whatever you're doing in the moment while the home is vacant, I think the other thing to keep in mind is to avoid trends. I know a lot of people have ideas. They see all this designer magazines. This looks really great. White is a terrible color in a rental property. In gray, millennial gray is going away. So to save costs, we want any improvements we make to last, but definitely avoid the trends and avoid, redesigning a space you're never going to live in.
Yeah, don't let HGTV is great entertainment, but don't let it guide your investing plans.
Yeah.
it could be perfect for your personal home, but not
Yeah.
for a rental property. And
Yes.
I mean, I think that's what our marketing or our leasing department said, was that people don't necessarily want to see the Taj Mahal. They just want to see a clean, well-maintained environment that's neutral, that they can make their own when they move the furniture in, that type of thing, and they can see themselves living there without anything off-putting. So, well, that's some great stuff. I really appreciate all that. I think hopefully we've navigated this subject a little better for our clients today. Appreciate your time and coming to this webinar. And again, we want you to stay invested in your investment. And if you have questions about, trying to work through your turnover, trying to make the projects get approved, work with your property managers. Our staff is here to do that every week, and we'll try to offer our guidance and our suggestions and help you through that. So until next time, stay invested in your investment.